Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us for another resident hour here at the University of Miami. My name is Victor. I'm a PGY1. I was here last time, and I'm very happy to have Steph here with me, and Steph can introduce herself to everyone.
Hi, I'm a PGY6. I'm Stephanie. Um, I guess we'll just get started if that's okay. In light of recent events and protests, we thought it would be interesting to have a discussion sort of about diversity and inclusivity in neurosurgery. So I don't know what the format was sort of like last week, but I think it'd be great if this could sort of be an open conversation. We're going to have like a short presentation, and then really if anybody has any questions or wants to just chat about things, I think this is a cool platform to sort of start that, as it is a very controversial and interesting topic.
Definitely.
So just briefly, I just wanted to start off talking about some of the health disparities and why we as physicians need to even care about these issues. And it's not just obviously the inequities and the injustices that we see in our country, but it affects all of our patients. And when you look at pretty much every single chronic major disease, Black patients suffer higher death rates than the white population in America. That's talking about diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, maternal mortality, infant mortality. It's really across the board. Next slide.
Mm-hmm.
And the important thing to realize is it's not just because of race, and that's obvious if you're not a racist, and that healthcare really exists in a full cultural context. So, if you have lower socioeconomic status, which is true in the Black population in America, that results in a number of things, including poor residential options, poor residential characteristics. When you look at the environmental impact of neighborhoods that are predominantly Black, they have higher rates of pollution, worse rates of climate change, and they have highways that are built through them, factories that lead to worse pollution that are built through them. And that leads to worse health outcomes in those populations, higher rates of asthma, higher rates of cancer, higher rates of respiratory illnesses. And then again, you have other healthcare problems that affects the community, affects maternal mortality, affects the health of all these people. And then again, these issues are sort of passed on to each generation and leads to, again, poor socioeconomic statuses. And so it really is a cycle that is difficult to break. And unless we actively try to break it, it is something that just continues. And the sad thing is that when you look at academia and who is actually doing research in health services, it's predominantly white. And so it's sort of no wonder that we've sort of allowed these inequities and this cycle to sort of continue on and on again. Next slide. And so I think that one of the reasons that, we're really talking about diversity and inclusivity at this moment is because people are recognizing that we need to involve people from these communities in order to appropriately study how to improve outcomes in a variety of ways. If we truly look at healthcare in its social and cultural context, we realize it's not just about healthcare coverage, it's not just about doctors having cultural and linguistic competency, but it's about economic stability, it's about education, it's about hunger, it's about all of these things. And that's why we really need diversity and inclusivity in order for people from the community to help us study and help us understand how healthcare can be improved. So, many people have started with increasing workforce diversity as sort of a goal in order to involve the community more, but it's, ultimately to decrease health disparities and achieve some form of health equity, which is going to come with both socioeconomic and opportunity equity in America. Next. And so, one of the things that we can look at from ourselves is Miami. And Miami is super interesting in America because it has actually a minority of white Caucasian people. 11.9% in Miami, 15.4% in Miami-Dade, whereas Florida looks a little bit more like the rest of the country, 57.9% white overall. But Miami-Dade is predominantly Hispanic, includes and also white Hispanic, which is between 65 and 74%. And the second most common is Black, which is 19% in Miami-Dade, and only 1% Asian. However, if you go to the next slide and you look at our JMH residency programs, you see that the largest subgroup of residents is white, is Caucasian. We're 35% white. Hispanic is high compared to perhaps other residency programs in the country, 27%, but really doesn't match with the community that we serve. Black is 7.7% and Asian is 17%. So, I think it's a reflection of who has certain educational opportunities in this country. And I don't think that the healthcare providers need to match the community exactly, but I think it is important to sort of recognize these disparities between the community and between the providers so that we can consider all of these social determinants of health. Again, I think that we have to be able to recognize the disparity in order to understand the cultural and linguistic differences between the providers and their community. I think there's this one study that was done that was really interesting where they had Black patients offered free preventative care screenings. And they found that when Black patients were randomly paired with Black doctors, they were between 20 to 70% more likely to actually receive preventative care than those paired with a white doctor. Even though they didn't rate the doctors any differently, subjectively, they didn't feel like the doctors were any more competent or not competent. But I think that they found that culturally, maybe they were just understood better. And this was actually reflected when they went back and looked at the doctor's notes. It was really reflected in the Black doctors had many more notes about like social aspects of the patient's lives. And so I just think it's something that's important to recognize. It's not saying that it's not something that can be taught, but in order for it to be taught, it has to sort of be recognized. Next slide. And so again, I think if we look at our UM and JMH diversity, you can see that we really don't match Miami-Dade, although we more closely match Florida, which is all the way on the left, but there is a huge Hispanic population in Miami-Dade and a much larger white subgroup of JMH and UM doctors and students. Next slide. And when you look at the subspecialties across JMH, you can see that neurosurgery is actually one of the worst in terms of diversity. It is 75% white, and we have no Black residents at the moment. And so again, I think that these are important statistics that we need to look and reflect upon and really try to remedy so that we can understand and address all of these inequities appropriately. So I think Victor is going to talk a little bit more about neurosurgery in particular and the need for diversity and inclusivity, and then we can talk about some of the things that we are looking forward to, pushing in order to remedy some of these inequalities.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Steph. So I'm just going to quickly take us back to neurosurgery while we're here and just show you some of the data and some of the events that have really come to the focus in the last couple of years to really highlight diversity as a priority within the neurosurgical field. First of all, if one types in neurosurgery into Google and types in diversity, you can come up, a lot of programs across the country are already implementing actions and statements to really encourage this message of diversity and inclusion, which I think is very promising because it signals perhaps something that's not always been within the circles of neurosurgical training. And again, it's very encouraging to know that this is becoming a big thing. One thing in diversity is obviously the gender balance. Recently, there have been a couple of papers published that have looked exactly at the gender balance, specifically within female applicants. There are multiple factors to consider that may be specific to females that programs are starting to realize. This World Neurosurgery paper in the top left, in fact, found multiple factors were specific to females rather than male applicants. And this great opinion piece by Rucker in Journal of Neurosurgery 2 years ago really highlighted how the current state of affairs is with respect to female applicants, female residents, and where they would like to see the field go in terms of that balance. In that paper, they created this very, very cool sort of graphic that I think is worth taking a little bit of time to go through to really just highlight how specifically with neurosurgery training is this a thing. Now, there are multiple issues, that face, applicants, especially females. There's an unconscious bias, there's harassment, and I think many people can attest to, there are increased home family responsibilities and lack of mentoring. I think by recognizing these first, it's a great way to really start feeling what can we do moving forward. Now, this was published in 2018, and in there you can see the percentage of females that make up people interested in neurosurgery at all education levels dropping, 51 to 6%. And so clearly there is something happening, from level to level, from etage to etage. And so it's worth wondering and questioning, what are they? The graphic at the bottom highlights within neurosurgical training where exactly we stand with female trainees in these neurosurgery programs. You can see in 1980 it was very small, and it's slowly but surely growing. Now, is it growing fast enough? That is something worth discussing. And please, if you have any questions, comments, feel free to either put your hand up. I think you can do that here on Zoom, or write a comment that we can read. But questions on how exactly to reach that parity, that 50% line. Is that reasonable? Can we get there? How long will it take to get there? These are all questions that I don't think have one answer, but have multiple discussion points to be had moving forward. For all of those interested, especially within the United States with the residency matching, the greatest predictors currently are step 1 scores and where you went to medical school for the most part. And in this study of Rucker et al., they showed that, when you adjust for both these major factors, female gender is still a prognostic factor, still a significant thing here in neurosurgery. And so whilst it is one thing to recognize these issues and how severe they may be, the next question is how exactly can we go about moving forward? There are many, many things to consider. And I can say here at Miami, these are things we're considering too moving forward. From anything from how a job is run, how is job sharing, to perhaps parental leave, and also just prioritizing, the exposure, both to the trainees, to the faculty, to interested applicants, to the gender balance. And I do think, should there be an active effort put in, within neurosurgery, we can make greater strides as we have to this date to further improve at least this diversity aspect. Shifting gears a little bit, but still nonetheless in diversity. This here is a very interesting study published very recently in JAMA Surgery that, as it says here, looked into, racial and ethnic discrimination within surgical residency programs. And the most interesting thing here is you can see at the top, I don't know if my mouse is showing, but there are multiple races: white, black, Hispanic, and Asian. And what they did was they decided to look at many different components of discrimination, as you can see listed on the left here. And what's the most fascinating thing about all of this is that every one of these was statistically significantly different in the fact that those that were white experienced a lot of these much less than people of other colors. And this could be by attending physicians, as well as patients, as well as colleagues. And so it's interesting, as Stephanie brought up, not only is, race and diversity an issue for our patients, but it's also an issue for us as well as professionals, as clinicians, as physicians and surgeons. to really not underestimate the significance of race in our practice today as professionals. In light of recent events within the last couple of months, the neurosurgery field has really shown, really come to its own about really expressing our need, our prioritization, and our desire to really have a balance in this diversity. Not only was there a statement specific by Black neurosurgeons in the wake of George Floyd, but here at Miami, we were able to present our own sort of webinars specific to this, really describing and capturing the feelings of not just neurosurgery, but of the nation and the world, which I think moving forward will really put us in good stead to really continue to encourage diversity within neurosurgery. And so at this point, there's a lot of principles, and this I just wanted, maybe Steph is going to just take a moment to perhaps describe how we've been able to turn this into practice, all these theories into what we have here today.
Yeah, that was a great job, Victor. I think that it's been a period of learning for a lot of people, for understanding sort of race relations in this country, and then, also examining ourselves and seeing how we can improve diversity and inclusivity. And so here at I wanted to plug, we have a scholarship specifically for Black medical students who are interested in neurosurgery and neuroscience. We want to be able to provide an opportunity to do research during a summer. In order to fund that, you guys just have to apply and send a project idea and your CVs, and then we are, still looking for donations to keep this scholarship sort of in perpetuity. And then in terms of some of the other things, specifically speaking as a female in neurosurgery, I think that mentorship is a huge part of it, and seeing other females in neurosurgery. It's really easy to feel like an outsider when you go to a program and there are no females. And I think that it's a warning sign too that, they're not interested in a different point of view, and that's also important to notice. So I don't know if you guys have any questions or if you have any comments. I think that we would like to sort of open the floor and have a conversation with anybody who's interested.
Yeah, rather than be didactic, we thought this could be a topic that we'd really, invite not only you to write a comment, but even put on a video if you would be so interested. It's great to put faces to the voice or the question, right, Steph?
Yeah. Hey, Jordan, in terms of the link for the scholarship, I think it's going to go live for next summer for you guys to apply. So it'll be on our website, and we will post it on social media and for all of you guys to see.
Yeah.
There's also a question from Dallas asking how step 1 transitioning to pass fail will affect opportunities. I think that's a great question, and I think it's actually a major push when you look at how programs have been able to improve diversity and inclusivity. One of the major things is actually relying less on step 1 scores, and I think that step 1 scores, like all standardized testing, somewhat contributes to inequality because it's, what resources you have to prepare for a test and what else you have going on in your life that affects that. So I do think that step 1 will help to improve diversity in neurosurgery, but I do think that, that does put pressure on other things such as step 2 and your medical school. And I think so it will take more than just not looking at step 1 or having step 1 be pass fail to increase diversity. You have to sort of have a much more subjective view on admissions rather than an objective like scoring system of every single aspect.
Yeah, and just echo your thoughts. I agree. I think having one less metric, this turning to pass and fail means that all the other metrics sort of, diversity, aspects of diversity that could be confounded by, a step 1 score won't be a thing anymore. And in theory, I think homogenizes the field just that little bit more.
Anna asks, as a woman in neurosurgery, what is one of your biggest challenges? I think, like all women, one of the biggest challenges is figuring out when to start a family. There's obviously no good time. Residency is busy, and so is fellowship, and so is your job. And unfortunately, no one else can do it for us. So I think it's one of the biggest challenges, and it's why you need other women in neurosurgery, because no one else is really gonna get it the same way that we do. And I think that if you want more women in neurosurgery, it's something that we also have to address and sort of be okay with. You know, I remember there were times when I went on interviews and people told me, like, you can't have a kid, and I was like, well, that's not really up to you. So, you know, I think that views of this are changing, and people are much more accepting and understanding and willing to be more flexible and actually willing to support you, realizing that you will be good at your job, despite the fact that you also have, you know, the responsibility of perpetuating our species forward.
Sure. There's a question by Megana. With COVID restrictions in place, how would you recommend early medical students to explore the field of neurosurgery, get involved in research remotely? That's you know, that's a very interesting question. I don't know, you know, with respect to diversity, you know, the most, I suppose one thing with the COVID restrictions and remote research is that it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, you can be involved. And this may be beyond the scope of this specific talk, but I would say, you know, electronic communication is probably one thing, and that doesn't discriminate between anything. So I would really encourage you, you know, if that's something you're interested in, you could either reach out to us. We'll put our contact details at the end of this presentation that you can reach out to us personally. But, you know, it's interesting you bring that up just because, you know, there's no, you know, it doesn't discriminate electronic communication, which I think would be the best thing for that. And just quickly, before Steph, maybe you want to take the next one. Nicholas has asked a specific question regarding international medical graduates. Nicholas, I'm going to show you at the end, but our next resident hour will be specific to that question, and my experience and other experiences. So we might just hold off for that. But I'll have my contact details at the end, which you can reach out to me directly if you want to ask more about that.
Yeah, Victor, I agree with the neurosurgery research part. I think that it's actually super easy. You just have to send emails and be persistent. You know, sometimes people won't see your first email, or they won't respond, or they'll say, you know, I'm going to respond later, and then they forget. So, you know, feel free to reach out to any of us. All of us have projects, and you don't have to be physically present in order to work on them. Michael asked, do you see any challenges faced by LGBTQ physicians in neurosurgery? Certainly, I think that it is also a minority. And, you know, I think that neurosurgery and neurosurgeons, many of them, you know, like I said, have been white males that tend to hold more conservative opinions. And so, again, I think that any kind of diversity is sometimes uncomfortable, and that's obviously a problem. And so I think that I know many LGBTQ neurosurgeons, and they've done an amazing job, and they you know, I think that you just have to find a program that is open and willing to talk about it, accept it, and doesn't make you feel discriminated against. You know, and I think, again, it's about finding mentorship and finding allies. But they are definitely, many of them, in neurosurgery.
Definitely. And the only thing I would add to that, you know, when it comes to finding allies is that social media has become a great tool of communication, especially during COVID. And I can say, Michael, that just from my own observations of what's been posted recently, especially within neurosurgery, you know, the challenges there may not be as great given how impressive the community and networking is. So, you know, exploring that also might help too. You know, there's a lot of, you know, very vocal, supportive communities online, which may actually be able to provide more specific, you know, perspectives than perhaps what I have, at least. and you know, guys, like I said, feel free to jump in with the video. It wouldn't be, we won't say no to that, but
I don't know if they can. I
oh,
don't, yeah, I think they can only.
never mind then. But you know,
I think it's a 10.
neurosurgery has historically been, you know, as Steph said, you know, a white male kind of specialty. But as you can see by the two people presenting to you today, it's definitely not the case anymore. And you know, and it's a great sign of, you know, diversification. And I personally think that, you know, it's going to continue. Steph, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's the right people who are pushing forward these changes and the right leadership that, you know, is accepting and also pushing forward for these changes. I think you need leadership who sees, you know, these issues and is willing to work with you, even though they may not affect themselves personally, you know. So we have a super supportive program director and chairman who listens and you know, is willing to work with us on a number of things. So I think that I think that things are only going to get better, and I think that people should, you know, be proud of who they are and represent themselves how they want to, and be a part of neurosurgery.
Definitely. Anna's asking, do you have fellow residents that are IMGs? You know, Anna, for example, I guess here at the Miami program, I consider myself an IMG. And, you know, I guess that's another component of diversity we haven't really touched on too much, but, you know, it is a part, you know, who is making up, you know, a residency program, a faculty, you know, medical applicants, how many of them come from the United States, how many of them come up from overseas, and you know, another question is how many, at least in our program, how many come from Florida? How many come from outside of Florida? You know, there's a geographic diversity as well. And you know, I really think to really summarize what this program does is it doesn't matter really what gender you are, what school you went to, you know, what's your orientation, what is your race, you know, what your geographic medical school is. Here at this program, I definitely have never felt that any of those factors have come into play, you know, because I think Miami is a program which we really pride ourselves on, you know, being diverse, you know, and considering everyone. Steph?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we are definitely working towards. You know, I think we've had a number of IMGs in the past. I think 3 within my time here. So I think they bring a lot of interesting, different perspectives. I think we currently have, or last year we had 4 female residents. And again, I think we're working on, you know, racial and gender diversity, as well as orientation. We've had a number, like I said, a number of LGBTQ residents in our cohort. So, you know, I think in terms of diversity, unfortunately, we do better than most other neurosurgery programs, but that's not necessarily a good thing. I think it's a reflection, though, of the progress that will come with the rest of neurosurgery.
Steph, you want to take this one?
What's the next one? What has your general experience been like as a female? A lot of people told me that women in neurosurgery will not have a family life due to the demands of your career. I'm curious as to your experience or your take on this. Yeah, you know, I think it's a huge challenge for women in neurosurgery, but I can tell you that I have some of my, you know, my best friends are females in neurosurgery, and many of them have had a family. Many of them, you know, one of my co-fellows, I did endovascular, I'm going into vascular. One of my co-fellows 2 years ago was actually pregnant during her fellowship, and it was an amazing experience. She definitely had time to take care of herself and her baby, as well as do an amazing job at her career. And I know that our three pediatric female neurosurgeons all have, I think, multiple children. And so, you know, I don't think when people tell you that you can't have a family that you should listen to them. It's your choice. and you will be able to do it. Will it be challenging? Of course, but parenthood is always challenging and neurosurgery is always challenging, but I think that you rise to the challenges, and people absolutely do it.
Yeah. So the next, there's a question. How did you guys decide neurosurgery is for you? That's a great question. I can definitely say, as a one, I've been on service for about a month now.
He's still not sure if it's for him.
Deciding, Jessica, is what I was. But I could say, like, everything I thought it was, coming on service is completely different. But like, I just, the people that when I was first exposed to, they were so welcoming, and they didn't care, who I was or where I was from. They were so welcoming, and again, kudos to them being so open. And I think by virtue of that, that links into diversity. But them being so open and supportive allowed me to explore. And I mean, the brain and the central nervous system is a fascinating system. I can't think of anything more, so I'm very happy with it. But that is the short version for me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think there's anything more fascinating than the brain. I studied neuroscience as an undergrad. I was always sort of philosophically interested in neuroscience. And when I went to medical school, I really thought about everything, and you should explore, you should shadow, you should check out every single specialty, and you should go into it with full enthusiasm every time you rotate, because you will learn something from everyone that way. But the first time I ever saw neurosurgery, I just thought it was beautiful. It was like an art form. And then on top of that, I think that there is nothing more terrifying than having something wrong with the thing that makes you who you are. To have something wrong with your brain is literally the most terrifying thing. It's not just a piece of your body that you can replace. It's you as an entity. And so I think being able to do something in that situation is incredibly powerful, and that's ultimately what made me decide to go into neurosurgery.
Guys, please, if you have any more sort of discussion topics, feel free to put them in. Just while we have the last couple minutes, I suppose, I just want to acknowledge some of the contributors that we have to this presentation. Please, if you're interested in the program, there's an email. Ingrid is amazing. Please email her. Like Stephanie's emails there, my emails there. Feel free to reach out to us with anything you may want to. We're also on social media, so by all means, jump out us to us on that as well. I think diversity is such an important topic, not just neurosurgery, but in society, as recent events have shown. And it's great to see that there's interest out there. And, here at Miami, it's something we pride ourselves on and something we want to keep going. So, everyone, thank you so much. I'm just going to do a little bit thing, the next topic, the next resident hour, I just want to give it a little spiel, is actually perhaps more pertinent to people in their final year of medical school. We're going to look at applying to neurosurgery residency. Like I said, I'm an international medical graduate, and I have a journey. And but I mean, we also have interstate, and what I want to do, or what we want to do next time, is also compare our journeys. And with applications opening up, this could be quite useful for anyone that is interested in that stage. And we'll advertise that via social media channels soon. But I guess, Steph, if there are no further questions, thank you so much.
I think there's one more question that Anna asked, which is, as a woman in neurosurgery, are you afraid of something? I saw on social media the med bikini.
Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, I did too, sorry. And it was something that I didn't expect to happen in 2020. And I completely agree. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen this paper, but it was essentially a paper put out by Journal of Vascular Surgery, wherein the all male authors created fake social media accounts and stalked random residents and decided whether or not the things they posted were inappropriate. And that included, if women were in their bikinis, or even political things such as Black Lives Matter or abortion. And I think that there has been a lot of backlash for it, and rightfully so. Not only is it very sexist, but it's also racist. And I think that it's important to call out these papers and these studies, and I think that I'm not afraid now. I think it's actually an empowering time to be a part of various movements that are calling on people to be better. And I think that, you know, it's what we all strive for. Obviously, if this world was perfect, we would have no work to do. So I think that rather than being afraid, it's a call to action.
Yeah, and if my memory serves me correctly, I believe that paper was retracted.
Yeah, I think they just decided to retract it
Yeah,
after all of the backlash.
rightly so. I think there's a quick question about research papers required to have. Now, that's a great question. That's probably better suited, if you don't mind me saying, for the next talk. But you know, there is no set number. Is the really super short answer to that. In my eyes, there's no set number of what will make it, what will break it. But please, by all means, tune in for us next month, and we are more than happy to go into more detail as to that question. And there's one more. There's Michael's asked, does Miami Neurosurgery consider DO medical students?
Yeah, I mean, I think we consider all medical students. Obviously, if you follow a more non-traditional path, it can be just more difficult, and statistically, you won't find yourself represented as much in the neurosurgery community. But you know, I think that if you are passionate, you're doing great work, you work hard, you know, we consider everyone.
Yeah, you know that there's you know that it's a great point. Diversity also includes, you know, where you went to medical school, and I suppose, you know, what type of medical education you had. And by all means, I don't think any aspect of that is discriminated at the application stage. Everything is considered. And oh, Frederick says thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, and on that note, I guess if there are no more topics. Thank you for being interactive with us here. I've really enjoyed it.
Me too. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. I'm just going to leave this up here for maybe just a little bit longer if you guys want to copy any of this down. But otherwise, we really appreciate your time, and thank you very much. Tune in for our next one.